your quality of life. So, how to make good choices in psychedelic decision making for you or your friends. So if somebody's like, I'm curious about this, I'm new, like when we're getting a lot of that, approach the inquiry with curiosity. Why are you interested in this? Is it because all your friends are doing it? Is it because you're having an ailment that's not being treated? Be curious. Be a well-informed citizen. So what are the potential benefits and risks? How do you access your substances? What's the availability? One of the things that I'm seeing a lot in the psychedelic underground is with it being so expensive, and there's a wide range of pricing. I've seen things from, you know, weekend-long ayahuasca ceremony, 3 ceremonies, like $700, $750, like reasonable, to a one-on-one psilocybin weekend journey for $15,000. I think that's a little pricey for most people, but also people spend $100,000 on a watch. Like for a small section of the population, spending $15,000 on a weekend is actually, it's not going to negatively impact their life. They can afford it. They want to work with this specific practitioner. And so, but what I'm seeing is people who don't have a lot of money, who are psychedelically curious, and they like save up their money. And they're like, okay, I have one shot to do this. And they go to their practitioner, and their practitioner is like, well, I want to make sure you get your money's worth. And I've heard people of upwards of 7, 10, 12 grams of mushrooms in one experience, and people having really intense, really challenging experiences from it. And it's like, why did they give you that much? And they're like, well, this was my like only shot at doing it. And I was like, that's like, it's a scarcity mindset that can be really dangerous. Or people who are completely psychedelically naive and they can only afford like $3,500 for a session with a practitioner, and so that practitioner is like, even though you've never done any drugs before, I'm going to give you psilocybin and MDMA and ketamine at the end of it. And it's like, why are you doing, like, or you could just charge less and be like, okay, we'll do one thing this month, and then in 6 weeks maybe we'll do another thing. But a lot of these like traveling medicine people are in town for a weekend, and then they go to the next town, and then they go to the next town. And so it's like, well, if I want to work with this person, I only have this one shot. And then that person is like, well, I don't want them to be disappointed by the experience. And so they end up going way higher overdosing recommendations and creating harm.
What are dosing recommendations? Like for
Go to Arrowhead.
okay.
Arrowhead has all of the dosing recommendations and expected length of, so depending on what your substance is, and they have it for every substance. And they have threshold, light, medium, high. They also have the LD50, which is the toxicity fatal dose, listed on that, usually by like milligram to kilogram ratio. And so done by weight. Interestingly enough, there is no LD50 for a person talking to you about wanting to do psychedelics because they want you to be their facilitator, because they feel attached to you in some way, like being able to talk about that. And then encourage safe use measures. So dosage, route of administration, how do you test your drugs? Do you have an emergency plan? Are you doing a solo journey? Obviously, if you're going to do a big experience, I never recommend doing it alone. I've had friends who have died from psychedelic accidents over the years by going too far without a sitter. I have a friend who took ketamine and it was much stronger than they thought it was, so they were unaware of their body positioning, and they ended up laying face down on a sleeping bag, and it was asphyxiating. So knowing how to put somebody into left lateral knowing if somebody's like going into a really deep experience, like how to keep their physical form safe if they are no longer present in their physical form. I've had people, and a friend in college was on mushrooms and lost her balance and was on the 3rd floor of a house and fell over the banister. Ground level. Don't like being up high. I've had Kristen Nash, the William Nash Foundation. He was a 21-year-old college student who was not in problematic use. Actually had a conversation with his parents like 2 weeks prior to his death, saying, "Mom, I just want to let you know, like, I would never take any pills, I would never do any powders, but like my friends and I, we really enjoy eating mushrooms," like, and ended up eating mushrooms, having psychosis, like having a psychotic episode. His friends knew to call first responders. EMTs arrived on scene. He went back into the house to get a drink of water, and picked up a glass and thought that it had water in it and drank it back, and it was filled with protein powder, and he asphyxiated on protein powder and died. Right? Like, what a freak accident. But like a horrible, and it was like, well, if your friends knew to like go with him inside and give him water because he doesn't know what he's drinking, like wouldn't have that been so helpful and would have saved a life? But like accidents happen. And his friend, who was also having a crisis, did the same thing and had the wherewithal to cough it up and was in the hospital for a while but survived, and he ended up dying. Senior at Stanford, 21 years old. No problematic substance use in his history, and so his mom started a foundation in his honor in his memory, to provide accurate drug education for college campuses. And like, it's a freak accident, but like accidents happen. And you know, the safer we can make, the better informed we are, the better citizens we are, the better stewards we are, like the safer we can make our communities. I got hired by a family of a 26-year-old girl who was out at a club in LA, and was given a substance that she was told was ketamine that was fentanyl contaminated. And the person who gave it to her dumped her body at the ER, and she ended up she ended up dying, and her parents hired me to go to her memorial and pass out Narcan fentanyl testing strips to all of her friends so it wouldn't happen to any of them. Like, awful. Like, never thought that would be part of my job, was to do drug education at funerals.
If someone is like in a cave, will they respond to the sternal thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They. I learned the sternum thing because in college I came home to my opiate addict partner and passed out on the floor unresponsive, breathing but unresponsive. And I called. Luckily, my best friend, her dad, was an EMT on dead tour. So also like harm reduction education in this moment. So I knew who to call, and I called him, and he came over and he did the sternum rub, and it was like a mixture of ketamine and nitrous. There were no opiates involved, and I can tell you he woke right up. And according to the late Jim Sullivan, who I'm getting this information from, that like ketamine, nitrous, any of the other ones, like people they'll move, right? If somebody's like,
well, because they're not dying,
yeah.
Right? Because with ketamine, it's not a respiratory depressant, and so even though they might be like passed out in a state, like their body functions are still working. And
actually, sorry, but this actually might be a good question for emergency responders because they do use it as an anesthetic, like in super high doses.
Yes.
So let me get back to you.
Yeah. But it's like you are like right with doing sternal rubs when you become unresponsive, it's because your body is shutting down and you can't respond. I think with ketamine, because your breathing and heart rate don't change, that even if you do that, they'll like your reflexes will still react to it.
And with ketamine, you can also, like, the person will be breathing perfectly normally and their pulse will be normal. Like, they use ketamine on ski pros. If you hit a tree skiing and puncture a lung and go into shock, they'll inject you with ketamine to get you down the mountain because it's like really effective anesthetic and it doesn't affect the breathing. So also just knowing basic, like, how to check if somebody's breathing or not. Typically, if somebody's breathing and their pulse is normal, like, you know, it's a problem if they're not responding, but they're probably.
Yeah, and also, I mean, ketamine is short acting. So, you know, by 45 minutes, they should be moving around again. GHB too, GHB is about an hour and a half that it'll wear off. But GHB is dangerous, it is a respiratory depressant. Please don't mix GHB and ketamine. Although I recreationally know a bunch of people who like that combo, so it's like a don't do what I do, but I've definitely been in those scenes before, and so it does happen. But knowing your dosing, I have friends who, especially with GHB, because it is such a volatile substance, that like a whiteboard on a wall, right, with everybody's names on it, and you write your dose time and your dose every time you take it. You also say your dose time out loud. Let me tell you, I just took MDMA at 9:30 p.m. Saying it out loud is not like, oh God, did I take that or did I not take that, or do I need to take more, and then you like lose it. And so having a tripping buddy who you can be like, I'm doing this, and like that gives you, and we'll talk about this in the next section, around like making agreements. And so the other thing would be like explore people's intentions. If somebody's talking to you, what's your intention? Is it for healing? Is it for existential work? Is it for grief? Why are you doing it? And so you can empower your community to make well-informed, healthy decisions. You can encourage the use of complementary therapeutic tools. Like right before you go into a psychedelic journey, you should probably journal. Maybe do some light stretching on a regular basis to like be already in practice of the things that we know will help people integrate. And then also be prepared for the unknown and discuss things like dissociation and hallucinations and altered states. And is this the right choice for you? Do you have a family history of somebody in your family having schizophrenia or somebody having bipolar 1 or any of those things? So this is my list of kind of common questions to ask medicine providers, right? Do you have an emergency plan? Is anybody there CPR trained? Is there a medic on site? Will you touch me? If so, what kind of touch will you touch me with? Are we going to be listening to music? What kind of music are we going to be listening to? I always ask before I work with people, especially with ketamine, I say, do you have like most music used in psychedelic therapy has no words to it. It's usually all instrumental. But some people are like, I don't like electronic music. I want it to be all classical. I want it to be all like organic sounds and not electronic sounds. Or I want things sped up. I don't like drumming. I don't like specific like strings, violin strings sometimes bother people. And so being able to craft a playlist around what kind of music, being able to say, hey, can we change the music?
I wanted to say that in my ketamine trip that I did, the last one I did in June, because it was bugging me so much, but I couldn't figure out
how to say it. Yeah, I always say if you before we go in, if something sounds weird, be like next track, like just like raise your hand,
Right,
like
have a signal.
right, have a signal, and I can skip to the next track. There's a great Jean-Baptiste Corey Wong collaboration album called Meditations that is really beautiful. Like it's non-electronic music. Siegal Center.
This is
John
the musician,
Hopkins
yeah.
is the musician.
Yeah, he has like a psychedelic playlist that's really cool.
He does.
Yeah.
It's great. I've used
Yeah.
it for.
Yeah.
But some people don't want the electronic stuff, and so it's like electronic, and so I'm like, I've been trying to find more natural, like more. Sometimes people want nature sounds, like jungle sounds, and obviously in the ayahuasca community, like the whole thing is very music led, and the container is really held through ikaros and musical spaces, and it's